advance? Okay. But that should do it. I'm not sure what happened. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us, and welcome to Berkshire Green Drinks. This event is organized by Berkshire Environmental Action Team, otherwise known as BEAT. My name's Chelsea Simmons, and I'm the programs director of BEAT. If you don't already know about us, we're a small nonprofit based here in Pittsfield. Volume, I feel like I'm being so loud already. You can learn more on our website. Like I'm yelling. You can learn more on our website, thebeatnews.org. I'm just screaming into this microphone. Or you could also grab one of our annual newsletter for those who are here in person. We like to think of our website as a community resource where we compile environmental events that others have sent us. We also have an environmental jobs board of regional job postings. We also keep an updated list of public notices that concern the environment in Western Massachusetts. And we, twice a month, go through the state's environmental monitor and highlight the big projects we should all be aware of and keep an eye on. And so if all of that sounds interesting to you, you can also sign up for our bi-weekly newsletter through the sign-in sheet that's floating around. And if you haven't signed in, please do so. That helps us keep track of how many people are attending our events, which is really important since we are a nonprofit. And you can also sign up on our website. Next month for our July Berkshire Green Drinks event, Laura Orlando, a senior scientist with Just Zero and an adjunct professor of environmental health at the Boston University School of Public Health, will speak about PFAS and sludge and just how they are alarmingly used in agriculture, which is a very important topic that many people don't know about. It's quite shocking. So I just switched. Please consider joining us for that. That's on Wednesday, July 9th. It will be hybrid, and we're still working out the in-person location. I also just want to thank Hot Plate for hosting us this evening and being thank you. And just being a recurring collaborator for Green Drinks events. Businesses like Hot Plate, which are willing to partner with us and also host this event for free. They're the reason that we're able to have these monthly events in person and also offer them free to the public. So with that, I would like to welcome our speakers this evening, Peggy White and Richard Clapper, who will speak to us about rodenticides, their effect on wildlife, and what we as Massachusetts citizens can do about it. And also for all those on Zoom, if you could please stay muted during the presentation. You're welcome to use the chat to put comments and questions at any time. And then once Peggy and Richard are done, we will do a Q&A. And then one more thing, we will have to finish just a few minutes early this evening because Hot Plate has another event taking place right at 7 o'clock. Lucas Schaefer, who is the author of The Slip, you see this. Oh, sorry, are you Lucas? Hi, Lucas, sorry. This is Lucas. He's the author of The Slip, and he'll be doing, he'll be signing books, he'll be doing a reading, and there's also going to be a Q&A, so consider staying for that. And I think that's everything, so I'm gonna hand it over to Peggy and Richard. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, I just want to welcome everybody tonight to our presentation on, wait, it's slipping, oh well, can we just go back to the Mass Audubon picture? Okay. Title of this presentation tonight is Rescuing Wildlife from Rodenticides. As Chelsea said, my name is Peggy White. I'm going to do a disclosure. I am not a pesticide certified person. I'm not a biologist, but I like to think of myself as a citizen activist. I was healthcare for my career, but I'm a nature lover. Richard and I are beekeepers, so we really know the potential dangers of poison, and we just want to be wildlife advocates when we can. As I always say, we have to be the voice for the wildlife. They can't speak for themselves. So I'd like to start tonight's presentation with a testimony by Sheeta Salamani. She is the executive director of the Congress of the Birds. She testified to a committee of Rhode Island legislators in April of 2024 on the inhumane impact of the second-generation anticoagulant rodenticides we're going to talk about. I'm just going to warn you, part of this testimony is pretty graphic description, but it really sets the tone and the flavor for this issue that's so important.
Thank you to the members of the committee for hearing this issue today. My name is Sheeta Salamani. I'm an artist, an associate professor at Brandeis University, but most pertinent to the reason that we're here today, I'm a federally and state licensed wildlife rehabilitator, and I'm the executive director of Congress of the Birds, which is the only wildlife rehabilitation clinic in the state that specifically focuses on the care, rehab, and release of wild birds in our state. So it's gonna be a little intense, my testimony, so bear with me. But this is a really critical issue, and it comes with a lot of intense feelings and a lot of intense kind of case studies. So I'm gonna assume that most people in this room have not really seen an owl, an eagle, a hawk, or a falcon up close. Maybe you've seen them, maybe you're driving on the highway, you see them kind of sitting on the light poles as you're driving by, maybe on 95. Maybe you're a birder, maybe you use that Merlin app and you hear their sounds, or you go bird watching and you see them in the trees and you get really excited because they're such incredible birds. But by up close, I mean in your hands. To really understand and appreciate the devastating effects of rodenticide, there's nothing more heart-wrenching than holding a dying bird of prey in your hands. It's awful. As a rehabber, I've learned what to look for when I get birds of prey in my clinic. Is its mouth pale? Are they covered in bruises? Are they bleeding profusely and their blood won't clot? Are they showing neurological signs? I'll never forget the first time that I had a patient and admitted a patient with suspected rodenticide poisoning. It was an eastern screech owl, and it had been found on a sidewalk near an apartment by a family who was walking their dog. When they arrived to my clinic, their teenage daughter was holding the owl, who was wrapped in a towel that was covered with the owl's blood. You can't really be squeamish in this kind of line of work. So there's a lot of blood, unfortunately. It was bleeding from its mouth, and it didn't appear to be stopping. As she handed it to me, she asked with her eyes wide, "Is it gonna be okay?" And I had to answer truthfully to her, "I don't know. It's unlikely, but I will do everything that I can. And I always do everything that I can, but this is a real battle that we are up against with eschars." It's crazy to think of a body so tiny to be losing so much blood. Eastern screech owls, for reference, are around 180 grams. That's about the size of an avocado, for those of you who might not know weight-wise. Not only was the owl bleeding from its mouth without clotting, its little tiny body was covered in bruises and it was seizing. Each one of its eyes was rapidly dilating and contracting out of sync. The owl looked terrified. In these situations, I actually can't help wondering, too, if they're gonna be okay, just like the teenage girl. I wonder if they wonder if they, are gonna be okay or not. Do they know that they're dying? How do they feel about the needles being pushed into their little bodies and the tubes being shoved down their throats as I try everything that I can to help them? Meanwhile, their frail and fragile little bodies deteriorate in my hands. I tried everything in my toolkit. Vitamin K to help reduce the anticoagulant effects. Toxaban, which is a charcoal and kaolin suspension to absorb the poison in the stomach. Fluids to help replenish all of the lost blood. Anti-inflammatories to help with its pain, because it must have been in so much pain. But I put in the oxygen machine. We have an oxygen condenser and hoped for the best, but I knew what to expect. About 6 hours later, the owl died, face down in the oxygen chamber, its eyes open wide, its pupils dilated at different sizes. I will never forget its face. I won't ever forget the faces of any of the patients that I've had come in for suspected eschar poisoning. Neither will my students. In 2020, during COVID, I had to teach remotely. And while teaching remotely on Zoom, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I told my students to sit tight while I just grabbed the door. My doorbell's always ringing and I'm always getting animals arriving at my clinic. So my computer was in earshot of the door, and unfortunately my students heard everything. It was Gina, who some of you might know, was one of the Providence animal control officers. She said, "Sorry, I didn't call." I was on a drive to pick up another animal, and I saw this hawk, and I had to bring it to you. It needs help, and I didn't want to wait too long. She ushered towards a carrier with a gorgeous adult red-tailed hawk in it. I need the carrier back. Is it okay if you could grab it out of there? She asked. I obliged, and I looked at the bird. It was shaking, and the inside of its mouth was pale. What's wrong with it? Gina asked. Likely rodenticide, I said. I'm gonna have to take it downstairs. I'll end shortly. So as I walked over to my laptop to tell my students that we'd have to end class early, the hawk began rapidly declining in my arms. Its head started to hang as it panted with an open mouth, and its body shuddered as it took its last breath. It died in my arms, and my students witnessed it. In shock at how quickly everything happened, I laid the body of the hawk on my floor and described to my students what had happened. I told them that the hawk was exhibiting symptoms associated with escar poisoning.
So I'll start with this. So many of you know the story of Rachel Carson. She published Silent Spring in 1962, which highlighted how DDT had contributed to the near eradication of bald eagles. In 1967, bald eagles were added to the federal endangered species list, and in 1972, the EPA issued a cancellation order for DDT, and then in 2007, the eagles were removed, or the bald eagles were removed from the endangered species list. So this is a case where, intervention was made with about a poison and made a difference. Next slide. So the story that kind of began this whole raptor rescue campaign through Mass Audubon was about MK. And MK was a beloved bald eagle. Which I don't have all my other information, but she was, I always think sometimes of wildlife, this is a little aside, but wildlife that chooses to make their home in an urban area, sort of volunteering their service. So MK hunted in the Mystic River area, but took up a nest in the Arlington Cemetery. And she had a mate, and they had a chick, and you can go to the next slide. But unfortunately, the chick succumbed to rodenticide poisoning in a very similar story as Sheeta Salamani said. And then sadly, 2 years later, MK was found on the ground under her nest and also succumbed to rodenticide. But this was such a beloved creature to the people of Arlington. They rose up and started a movement, and hundreds of people showed up in the streets rallying against the dangers of rodenticide. And I think it just is an interesting contrast for us because we are so blessed in Berkshire County to be surrounded by wildlife. We see bald eagles and red-tailed hawks and owls, quite frequently. But so the challenge for us in this area, how do you, get a movement going without that really personal relationship? But that's what really started this anti-rodenticide campaign. Next slide. So what is the problem? The problem is that there's over-reliance on rat poisons, such as these second-generation anticoagulant rodenticides. And what happens is, when the rodents ingest this bait laced with rodenticides, the blood stops clotting, eventually leading to their death. But unfortunately, they can live for 2 to 7 days after they've eaten the bait, and that's when they become sort of easy catch for the predators and raptors. And so at that point, the predators become susceptible to the poison's effect as well. And so it's not just the bald eagles that are at risk, but any kind of predator. So fox, coyote, owl, hawk, etc. Escar use is very common, unfortunately, and just to get a sense of the immensity of it, 96% of all rodenticides applied by pest control companies in 2022 were escars, and that's approximately 536,000 pounds of rodenticide. You can go to the next slide. There was this slide is wordy, but what I really like is it kind of helps explain why we call it second generation. So the people, like I said, use these anticoagulant rodenticides to try to control rodents. the escars are indiscriminate, so they can affect other mammals and birds. So the primary exposure is when rodents or other animals consume the poison bait, which disrupts their blood clotting. But then the secondary exposure is when wildlife predators or pets eat the poisoned or sickened rodents. And so that's the secondary poisoning. So that's why it's called second generation anticoagulant rodenticides. So the secondary poisoning occurs to the predator even with non-lethal doses. So many of the sick predators will have certain things that are affecting them before they die, like immune system is compromised. They have less ability to regulate their temperature. They have increased stress hormones, more susceptibility to infections, and general poor body condition. And so these, and the other piece is these anticoagulant rodenticides are bioaccumulative. So as they are ingesting rodents more and more, it's a cumulative effect where they eventually do succumb to the rodenticides. Next slide. So this slide, I've pretty much described what the escars are. That's the kind of abbreviated term. So second generation anticoagulant rodenticides. If you keep saying it, you'll eventually have it roll off your tongue. As we know, it's a category of poisons that kill by preventing blood clotting. So the interesting thing is that these were banned for retail sale because of the dangers to pets and children. But the law went in before e-commerce. So that's the interesting piece about laws. So people are able to purchase them online. But they are widely used by licensed professionals, and that was the idea of the initial legislation. So, actually, if you can go back, this is a picture of a bait box on the inside. So poison is bait, and bait is food. So the poison is laced in something that's edible and yummy. This looks like a donut. But this is the inside of the box. So it shows the hole where the rodent goes in, and then they access the bait that way. You can go to the next slide. So as I said, the poison is placed in these bait boxes, and the places that you often find them are near dumpsters, basements, along foundations, under porches. If they are used indoors, they have to be labeled, but if they're used outside, they only need the pest company label on them. And these are the names, and forgive me, I'm going to try to pronounce them right, but I love to give the kind of the brand name. So these are four of the most common, Rotificon, and the name is Mouser or Rat-Tack, R-A-T-A-K. Bromadiolone, they call it the Mackie Mini Block. Difenicon is called Di-Kill, and I can't say this, difethylone is called Ombre. So, the names are just kind of blow me away. But that, these are the bait boxes, and you can see how, once you start looking for them, you'll find them everywhere. I went to Barnes & Noble. Right by the front door is a bait box. So you can go to the next slide. They're widely used. You start to find them everywhere. So what is the solution? The first solution is trust nature and trust the raptors. Rodent predators are really the best solution. When we poison them, we destroy nature's best pest control. And we know rats and mice have coexisted with humans for thousands of years, and despite aggressive attempts to exterminate them across the world, there are only geographically isolated human settlements, such as some islands in the province of Alberta, Canada, which I don't know why, have managed to eliminate human-dependent rodents entirely. But for many communities, they're here to stay. And really, the issue with rodents is when they get inside. And so when they're in your home or in your business, it's stressful, and that's when it poses a problem. And so the solution is a term called non-poison integrated pest management. And so this is really this should be the hallmark and the best way that we do manage rodents. And there are sort of several different levels to this integrated pest management. And this is like just an interesting aside about educational campaigns. When I first started doing this presentation, the Mass Audubon had the pyramid the other way. Now they've changed the design of the pyramid, but I think that's because they really want the last resort to be the smallest and to kind of start at the top and work down. So we can go to the next slide. One of the first places to start, because like I said, the problem is when they get inside, is trying to exclude them. So trying to keep them from getting inside. So you want to seal off the rodent entrances, holes and spaces that are occurring under porches, openings where cables, pipes, and wires enter the space or the house. You can use things like wire mesh, which can help prevent access. And then there is something that's interesting. It's called rodent monitoring the rodent activity by a bait that makes the droppings glow green under a black light. So you can walk along the areas, and when you find the droppings, and they're glowing, then you know that's where the rodents are coming in. And then also with excluding, you can use non-toxic repellents. So some of these are things like botanical repellents that you can buy in prepackaged bags that include things like cayenne pepper, mint, to name a few. Also, some people will use spicy food like hot sauce, essential oils, strobe lights, or plug-in ultrasonic rodent repellent devices to prevent them from coming in. The second part of integrated pest management is to starve the rodents. So that's by minimizing their food source, they won't come in and they won't come to your property. So the first is to avoid leaving food out for prolonged periods of time, including pet food, human food, livestock feed, and bird seed. And it's interesting that this is a Mass Audubon program sponsored campaign, so everybody in Mass Audubon loves their birds. So when I've seen Heather Packard, who's the community advocate for this program, talk about it, it's always hard for her. But there are ways, if you do feed the birds, and of course in Berkshire County, we don't recommend that in the winter or in the summer and most of the season that the bears are active. But if you do, there are ways to use less bird seed. You can buy already whole sunflower seeds, try to clean up around under the bird feeder, bring the bird feeders in during the day or during the nighttime. And the other is how you manage your trash. I know in Pittsfield, they now have these plastic large containers, but it's amazing when you drive through on garbage day how many of the lids are open. So if the lids are open, that leaves the access available for the garbage. And then I think Great Barrington has these trash cans that are kind of look like mailboxes. So that really prevents the rodents from getting into the trash that way. The other two ways is to think about your compost. That's right, to think about your compost. If you live in an urban neighborhood, you might choose to have a compost that's kind of freestanding that can prevent rodents from getting in. And then I love one of the recommendations is to harvest your vegetables quickly in your garden, but we find that sometimes the rodents and the animals will get the vegetables before they're ripe. But it's just the idea of how do we eliminate the food sources. So you can go to the next one. And then the last step is really to target specifically if you still continue to have a rodent problem after you've eliminated it. And again, number one, raptors. I think, like I said, an owl will eat 1,500 mice in a year. So that's a pretty great pest management. And so if we can create sort of raptor-friendly environments, for them, that's helpful. If you do need to use traps, and I know as animal lovers, it's always hard to talk about killing. So I think the point is, how can we do that the least painful, the quickest, and most humane? So snap traps tend to be really effective. They're non-poison. This example they show here, kind of putting the snap traps in a little stall, that enhances the effectiveness of the snap trap. As you know, that can often be a problem. If snap traps are used, you really need to make sure they're not in a place where pets or children can have access to them. There are other alternatives like electronic traps where the mouse goes into a box very similar to the bait box, but it does cause electrocution, which is also very quick. CO2 can be used, and dry ice can be used to go into the burrows once you've sealed up the areas. The other non-escar poisons that can be used are vitamin D, which is cholecalciferol, or sodium chloride. These are recommended to be used for short periods of time. They come with their own dangers. The second generation anticoagulant rodenticides, if the poison, if the animal is caught early enough, they can use vitamin K, which was mentioned in the testimony. The cholecalciferol has no antidote, and it is neurotoxic. So that is why the Mass Audubon recommends that it can only be used for a short period of time. And when we talk about the poison, one thing I didn't mention is that pest management companies really advocate this. As I said, it's the most widely used poisons. But if you are contracting with a pest management company, you can discuss your choices and your wishes for them, and they can, that's part of the bargain. And so if you don't have that discussion, they will most likely use the second generation anticoagulant rodenticides. Now, one of the other methods I wanted to mention that's up here is the rodent contraceptive, which sounds funny. Actually, in the one neighborhood of Jamaica Plain in Boston, they are doing a trial of effectiveness of that. The reproductive rate of rats particularly is phenomenal. And so this actually may be a very effective way. It also keeps the pest companies in business because they have to continue to resupply the contraceptive in the bait boxes. And I did this presentation in April at Berkshire Community College, and one of the attendees has now been using rat contraception at his residence here in Pittsfield. He says, I've noticed a change. So, and that's something that you can buy as a private homeowner. There is a mention here about glue traps. Glue traps are just painful, slow, and do not recommend use of that. And I saw a picture recently, they can end up catching other critters like birds. So highly advise people not to use that. You can go to the next slide. So as I sort of mentioned, Mass Audubon has this raptor rescue program. It is part of their climate advocate campaigns, of which they have many topics. And one of the things that I think we all are faced with is the overwhelming amount of climate issues, the overwhelming things we feel like we have to get involved with these days. And what I like about this campaign is it's really targeted. It has a very specific goal. It has very specific things you can do, and you feel like you're making a difference. And also that, we're tied to a greater organization that has done a lot of the road work for us. And so this Mass Audubon, it supports volunteers with their kind of municipal campaigns to curb these poisons. They give logistical support. They give strategic advice. They help us connect with other groups. And there's just helps kind of amplify the local campaigns, partly just by their membership, which is thousands of people in Massachusetts. Next slide. So there are several arms to this campaign. The first is to educate property owners. And so how we've been doing that is we've been doing tabling events with some of the same information in this slideshow, farmers markets, wherever we can do tabling. Because I think when people are educated about the dangers and the ramifications on other wildlife, that helps people wake up, and that integrated pest management is an option. The other are more legislative arms. So one can happen through city council and through select boards, which is advocating for local regulations. So one thing that's interesting in the state of Massachusetts, there is a state law, and like General Law 132B explicitly states that cities and towns may not enact more stringent regulation than the state in the areas of pesticides, herbicides, and rodenticides on private property. So one of the legislative arms is to have the city council or the select board enact a regulation that would ban and restrict the use on public and municipal properties. And so that is a start. The next piece of legislative activity is to file for something called a home rule petition, which is towns can make a request to the state legislators requesting specific powers or authority that allows them to be exempt from the state law. And so this has to actually go through the legislation as a bill. And so the more towns that submit these home rule petitions, it bogs up the legislation. And so they have to grant towns the right to ban them on the private property if they vote for it. But that is part of the building momentum. So you can go on to then push for legislation for statewide bill. So presently there is a pending bill, an act restricting the use of rodenticides in the environment. And the computer jumped. So this has been filed by Representative Hawkins, and the bill in the House is House Bill 965, and then Senator Moore in the Senate. It's Senate Bill 644. These bills would phase out the use of SCARs in the state of Massachusetts, and it's helpful for people to have offer their support. We are lucky in Berkshire County that all of our local legislators have co-sponsored the bill, but it doesn't hurt to send a personal message that you're in support of that when it does come up. And personalizing your message is always a good idea about why it's important to protect wildlife. You can go to the next slide. And certainly whenever we get involved in a campaign, it's important to become educated. So one of the really important tools Mass Audubon offers is this Raptor Rescue Toolkit. It is everything and more you want to know about the campaign. It includes information about how volunteers can get started, all the tools to support campaigns. There are templates for the home rule petitions. So if that's something that an area, that your town or municipality would want to get involved in, the statistic that I mentioned about red-tailed hawks, 100% that were tested had rodenticides in their system. That study is available on the toolkit. So it's a really great resource. Next slide. There also on the website is a municipal tracker. And so that's a way that towns can report and we can all keep track what's going on statewide. When I started doing this presentation, the picture of the map of Massachusetts was not very full. So this just starts to show you that the momentum is building. And towns like Arlington, Lexington, a lot of towns, east of, in the eastern part of the state, have been really involved early, partly because of the story of MK, but we are moving west, and the momentum is building. Next slide. What are some of the specific roles Mass Audubon does? They provide monthly meetings, so if you're interested in attending an orientation, this is done via Zoom as a new volunteer. They have monthly leadership meetings that we can plug into to find out what the different campaigns are doing and the progress. And like I said, they provide the information and resources. They can help us jointly plan kickoff events. As I said, Heather Packard, who is the advocate for this program, will come to your municipality and do a kickoff event. She did kickoff events here in Berkshire County at Pleasant Valley Nature Center, A kickoff event happened in Williamstown, and a kickoff event happened here in Pittsfield, and then in Sheffield. So we now have sort of 3 arms in the county of regions where we have volunteers that are starting to work. The Pittsfield arm has been in conversation with the city council. Williamstown, the person up there is having conversation with the select board, but as you know, a lot of towns had their local elections, so there's 2 new select board members in Williamstown. So, the lesson with that is it's a slow process, and so when you get involved in these campaigns, it may take time, because the person in Williamstown was discouraged, but it's like, that's okay. They'll get their feet wet, and then you can come back and present this issue. So there is a lot of support with the local, and I found it's really helpful to connecting with some of the other groups and know what they're doing. Next slide. So how can you get involved? Reviewing the toolkit to get yourself informed. You can join a municipal team. Like I said, we have a group here. We have a group in Pittsfield. We have a great, the South County, trying to organize about 7 towns, and then in Williamstown, you can certainly decide if you want to start a kickoff event in your own town. I can help you contact with Heather and to plan your kickoff event with her. Next slide. We've called ourselves the Rescue Berkshire Wildlife Group. We meet via Zoom the first Thursday of the month at 7 o'clock. This next meeting in July, because it's July 3rd, we'll be meeting July 10th because of the holiday weekend. We do have a email, which is rescueberkshirewildlife@gmail.com. So if anybody wants to reach out to us, that would be the way to do it. And then if you want to stay informed, if you're on Facebook, there is the Rescue Berkshire Wildlife, where we are putting information about our local events, and then that's where I often share what's happening in other groups. So as there are victories in other towns, we get that on the Facebook page so people know what's happening across the state. I think that's everything. So thank you. And I can take questions. Any questions? Oh, thanks.
Want to just put questions in the chat. You could try unmuting. I can't guarantee that we'll hear you though.
And just while we're waiting,
This microphone? Well, I'll probably.
can I just say that I do have some stickers. This was part of the sharing from another campaign in Arlington. So I have stickers here tonight. My only catch is if you take one, put it on your car or someplace visible. I also have a sign-up list if anybody's interested. And I did forget to mention one of the other activities that's helpful to gather information is to do a bait box survey to actually know where the bait boxes are on municipal property. And so we are going to be doing that in Pittsfield, July 28th at 2, or not July, excuse me, June 28th at 2 p.m. I don't have the location where we're going to meet at this point, but if anybody is interested in doing that, either send an email to the email Berkshire, we can go back, the Berkshire email, or sign up on the sign-up sheet if you're here tonight, and just put a little comment, please, that you're interested in the bait box. And if you do sign up, please make sure your name and emails are legible. Sometimes we have a hard time, and that's the only way we reach you. And if you put your town, you don't have to put your address, but that way we have our email list kind of coordinated by town. Oh, yes.
So I work at the Row Retreat Center in Rhode Island, and we are, I believe, getting rid of our pest control company. I imagine there's going to be a conversation, thank you. I imagine there's going to be a conversation about how we're going to take care of that issue, if it is an issue. I've already voiced about the glue traps, how I feel about those. They say they need them for insects, but...
Oh, the what does?
The retreat center says that they need the glue traps for insects, which
oh.
I think is odd. But so backtracking, if I have this conversation with my boss tomorrow about how are we going to take care of the pests on our own, like as people without a pest control company, do you have advice for that?
Well, I guess I'm not a pesticide. I think that the very first place to start are the kind of beginning parts of the integrated pest management. I know I've been to Row, so sealing up its old kind of funky buildings, but because like I said, rodents are a problem when they get inside. So how do you keep them out of the most important parts? Your kitchen, your residential areas, your anything to do with food. So that would be the first, is to really check. Some pest management companies, that's a lot of what they do. They inspect the outsides of the buildings. They help seal those up. So they're not all bad. And the problem with the over the counter, what you buy through retail pesticides are the ones that are the vitamin D, which can be so neurotoxic. Pets are not as much of a problem on conference area, but they are neurotoxic. They get in the hands of children, or pets. But that is an option. But the other, if you're going to do it yourself, snap traps. But that just means somebody has to be diligently assigned that job. Check the traps every day. Some snap traps allow, collection of more than, there are different types, but do you remember, they allow collection of more than one, electric ones. So it would have to be sort of diligent, maybe putting the snap traps in those little stalls. But like I said, if you discuss and kind of interview your pest management company, they will offer some they might offer alternatives. But I think that really start is with your buildings and your grounds and how you manage, your garbage, et cetera.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
That's where the toolkit might come in handy to advocate against at least the use of SCARs. There is, if people want to kind of introduce this whole campaign on the toolkit, there is a really great 4-minute video. I had to decide which 4-minute video did I want to use tonight, and I chose the testimony, but that just encapsulates it in kind of a slick, professional way, why we need to avoid the use of this specific category.
Thank you.
Yes?
The microphone is so that people on Zoom can hear.
Yeah, for everyone who asked questions in person.
Obviously, we would love to all be able to encourage the Raptors to be around as our pest control. Are there specific things that you could mention that would say, like, these are the kinds of things that might encourage an owl to take up residence around your home?
And I when I was practicing today, I said, I need to look that up. I think certainly one thing people do, and maybe Chelsea, you can answer this, but some people do owl boxes, as one option. We always say that if our yard is kind of is as clean as we can do, so we know that the mice that are near our yard are poison free. That certainly encourage it. But I don't know if there are specific things. No, not sure. Yeah, that's true. Leaving dead trees can help in creating sort of a mixed habitat. I think if you create a habitat that is friendly to rodents away from the house, that might help do that. But I don't have all the answers on that one.
This is creating those environments for birds to come in, whether it is with feeders or just native plants. You will notice certain raptors who will start frequenting your yard as more birds start coming to your yard. So many people with bird feeders know that you put the feeders up, the birds show up, and then the Cooper's hawks and red-tailed hawks start showing up. So that's a circle of life, we'll say, but that's a really good way, in addition to things like owl boxes.
And I think it's also it's sort of that circle of life. It has broken my heart, but when we have nests, the fledglings often get taken by hawks, and it's like, how can I protect that? But it does happen. Any other questions?
see you.
Bruce?
There was a question on Zoom, and someone answered it. It was just, are the S jars in the same category as nicotinoids? And someone said no, it's in a different class of chemicals. But someone else did mention here, you can look for a wildlife-friendly rodent control professional. If the company uses SGARs, you can request that they do not use them. They may try to tell you that it won't work, but be firm and say no. Also, wildlife control professionals are usually not licensed to use pesticides as opposed to pest control companies, and many wildlife control professionals tend to use more humane rodent control measures.
Yes. I love that answer that they gave, because it is really that you have to be an advocate and be emphatic. Because that's part of the issue. The pesticide companies are worried that they're going to become obsolete, as people choose non-poison options. But like I said, many of the companies do get involved with the excluding and how to help people seal up the holes, etc. And if contraception is an option, they have to continue to replace those.
Are there any other questions? I think we have time for one more, maybe.
So almost anything you feed to the bottom of the food chain can have upstream effects. Has there been any look into the contraceptive and whether the contraceptives have an upstream effect?
I'm sorry.
You mentioned the rat contraceptives. Would they have an upstream effect to the predators as well? Do we know if those are rodent specific?
As far as I know, they do not, because they're not it doesn't have the bioaccumulative issue. So no, that I understand, it does not.
I guess we actually have time for one more question if anyone has one.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Really
all so much.